Hey, y'all. This is Sam with the Roots of Change podcast, and I'm really excited because I have two of my close friends, Stone and Taj, on the podcast today. And we have been wanting to have this conversation for some time, but we also ended up having this conversation around Trans Visibility Day. So today we are talking about living life as a trans person in the United States in this current moment, but also more so about spirituality and community and how we can learn from the 1%, the trans community, the good 1%, not the bad, wealthy 1%. So I'm going to turn it over and would love, Stone, for you to introduce yourself and share just why you're here and what work you do.
Sure. My name is Stone. Pronouns are they, them. And I am a mix of a life coach and a facilitator and a trainer for justice workers. And we like to focus on aligning our beliefs, our heady theory, with our actual everyday behavior and integrating that as we build a world of ease, grace, and justice.
And Taj, we all do very similar work, but please share your work.
Sure. I'm Taj. I use he, him pronouns, and I am the founder of Rooted Respite, a virtual online coaching and support community for folks who are working in social change. So activists, advocates, EI practitioners, just general people who care about creating an equitable world and a regenerative planet. Also, have been a trans man for the last, it'll be 16 years in about a month. Happy to be here and to talk about all of the things that I am and I love.
Yes, I love that. Yeah, and I think like one thing I wanted to kind of level set on and from the start is like this is a conversation with three different people who all identify as trans in different ways, but we also are not the trans community. We do not represent every single person. I use she, they, he pronouns. I consider myself two-spirit, and so I still do identify as a woman, even if I do identify as non-binary and outside of just the binary of womanhood. But we also don't have, a trans woman in this conversation. Black trans women especially have it extremely hard in our society. There is a lot of violence towards trans people, and especially towards people of color. And so I just wanted to level set there at the top that this is a conversation with us. But I would love, Stone, for you to just kind of share a little bit about your experience over the years and how kind of this journey has led to who you are, and your purpose almost.
Well, we don't often get to talk about this. And it's interesting because on some level, it's both true and not true, that I am trans because of TERFs. TERFs, if people don't know, stands for Trans Exclusionary Radical Feminists, which, yes, is a bit of a contradiction. Those are the people who raised me as a baby activist, right? I started out doing racial justice work, anti-apartheid work in the 80s when I was in high school. And so then in the early 90s, I was in a college with a very large radical lesbian feminist community around it. And those are the women who sort of built a lot of my political understanding. That through that lens of second wave radical feminism. And I was happily, joyfully, enthusiastically excited about being a cisgender woman, right? And bleeding with the moon and womb power and spelling women with a Y, the whole thing, right? And was very into it and did not stay in what you might consider mainstream feminist organizing. I went back to human rights, right? And did that kind of work in community organizing and support and that kind of thing. And then through the Byzantine maze of my health situation, one thing led to another. And among my disabilities, I ended up in 2019, is that right? 2019? Having a surgery, the sum of which meant that I was no longer able to have children, right? I don't have any biological children, but at that point, it was officially canned that wasn't going to happen for me, because I no longer had some of those organs that would have made it necessary, made it possible. And I woke up like the next day after that surgery and was sort of doing a little body scan, just sort of checking out how I felt, right? I just had this major surgery. And as I sort of like felt my way through my body with my consciousness, I was like, where is my gender? And I was like, well, what do you mean, where is your gender? How do you lose that thing? Like, I was, right? I was like, and at the time I was like, well, okay, you just had surgery. Everything's changed. We'll give a minute for the dust to settle. We'll see if it comes back. And then also later in 2019, this little virus happened. And I ended up isolated with everyone else, perhaps to a more extreme extent than some other folks did. I live alone. And because of my health, I'm probably still stricter about the way I'm COVID cautious than a lot of people. And so in that great time of just being by myself, I sort of began to think about this more and explore this more and wanting to find a way to frame it, a way to think about it. Because what I knew was increasingly true was that I would be on the video calls and someone would say, well, we're all women here. And there was part of me that wanted to be like, wait, what? And I was like, and I'm like, Stone, no one needs to know about the surgery. No one cares if you're breathable, okay? This is a work meet. And, yeah, like just increasingly uncomfortable being called a woman.
Mm.
And so grateful to the young people who spend their lives thinking about gender so that I don't have to. Because I can't tell you how many blog posts I would read or whatever, and I would go to the profile and it would say, do not engage, I am a minor. And I was like, I'm learning gender theory from a 17-year-old? Okay, fine. And, I have days, not recently, but they happen, where I feel more feminine, where I feel like, oh, this is my womanness, like making a guest appearance, and a lot of the times I'm just kind of in the middle. I'm like, yeah, I could be a little mushroom. I have no set gender. That's fine. Let's go with it. And that felt better. It just felt like I had more room to breathe. And what I noticed is, like, for me, from my perspective, feminism went in two directions, right? And there was the direction which directly feeds into where we are now politically. There was a direction that said women have been victimized and they are inherently different than men and they will always be victimized. And so all positions must be defensive and we must center the risk we are in at all times, right? And then the other branch of feminism, went with like empowerment and diversity is brilliant and gender is a bit of a construct. And, in the 90s, I would say if a woman does it, it's a womanly thing, right? And so then I felt the backlash. Trans men would tell me, well, I'm not a woman because I'm into sports or I'm assertive or whatever. And I would say, well, nuts to you. Like you can be into sports and be assertive. What are you talking about? It was all like these like surface definitions.
Yeah.
And what excites me about gender these days and about my gender is that it can be so fluid, so um, my gender is part of an ecosystem, and so it gets informed by the environments I'm in and also has its own nature, and it's going to do what it wants. So I say I'm aware of the narrative that a lot of trans people have, that they come to an internal knowledge of their gender and then they change their external presentation and whatnot to align with that. And I feel like I am chasing my body around, right? My body's like, we're doing this now. And I'm like, wait, I'm catching up. Let me grab my Joyce Butler. We'll figure this out.
Yes.
So, and so that because I'm in this liminal space, that's what gets me thinking about spirituality. That's what informs me, looking at the current political situation as one of people being afraid of liminality.
Yeah.
And afraid of, not being afraid of nuance, but also being afraid of change, of just the impermanence of everything,
Yeah, I really appreciate that, because I think, like you mentioned, Judith Butler, and it's the nuance of gender is so fraught right now, and like it's always been fraught. But I think we're having conversations that we haven't had in a really long time about what gender actually is. And like you're talking about it in that the two different ways that trans people understand it, which is this internalized understanding of ourselves versus the external, how we present to the world and how the world defines that in terms of a binary between man and woman. So Taj, I would love to turn it over to you and just talk a little bit about your experience in coming to your terms with your transness and how that kind of evolved throughout this like really fraught time. Like you and I are both around the same age, and millennials coming up in this age is a very interesting moment. So
the interesting thing for me is that my gender exploration, like it's something that I knew from a very young age and just kind of had the stuff down, and grew up in a really conservative area of California, and it was made very, very clear to me that were my gender different from anything that I was assigned or prescribed, that would not be okay. But like, when I was coming into I came into my queerness in high school, like came out in the early 2000s, was one of the like few out kids in my high school, and like 2000 to 2004 like is a very like interesting time culturally, like coming off the WWJD movement and like the rise of megachurches. Like there was a megachurch that was just starting to take hold down the street from my high school that everybody started going to, and they started running groups for those large air quotes around that, groups for kids like me, and like a lot of people went to them. And it's just like seeing how that happened and how that impacted like some of my friends, and like it wasn't something that like I ever really thought that like I never thought that my queerness was something wrong with me. I was always under the impression that that's a world problem, like being black where I grew up too. Like my brother started being racially profiled because he was like 6 feet tall when he was 13 years old, and like would get stopped by the cops like pretty regularly. Like other black friends in school like would get pulled over and called the N-word and stuff like that. So like I was very well aware of the fact that like there are social biases that impact how people will react to me and interact with me, and this is one of them. Queerness is one of them. This ain't a me problem. That's a you problem. And you need to go pray on it, baby. And
yes,
but something about like transness was very scary to me. Partially because it was so foreign. Like I had never known a trans person to my understanding of, my life at that point. Like I had a couple friends. They were sisters, and they had a trans aunt in high school. And they would tell stories about their trans aunt who transitioned in the 80s and how it was just like not a big deal. Like they had a trans aunt. And just something about that like piqued my curiosity, but it was that kind of like, oh, this is dangerous. And I'm like, that's a dagger that if I grab by the blade, I will bleed. So let me just keep it at a distance and not go into it too deeply. So yeah, I stuffed a lot of that stuff down. And with the funny part, the interesting part is that I didn't come into my transness until college, when after I'd started going to a queer Christian group on campus. Started reading the Bible again and like exploring Christianity and asking the questions about God that I had and that I wasn't allowed to ask in the youth groups that I came up going to. I say I came up going to, like, very briefly and then left. Because again, it was a them problem. But like, so the deeper I dove into my spiritual journey and like started uncovering the like just the vastness of God and of like my understanding of divinity started to widen. It just opened the door for my understanding of the world and so many other things to open up, and all of these questions just started bubbling up, and I was like, oh, this gender thing. Here it is. Because like, yeah, I mean, it was something I knew, like, you know, like being in third grade and like taking the boys' bathroom pass because I thought that if I had the boys' bathroom pass, then I had to go to the boys' bathroom, like that sort of stuff. Like,
you're gonna trick them into it.
Exactly. Like, oh no, I grabbed the wrong bathroom pass, so I have to use this bathroom. That's in my 8-year-old understanding, that made sense, right?
Totally.
Like, there are elected officials that would make sense too today, Tosh.
Yes, there absolutely are. But yeah, like as I started to like hang out with this group and like feel fully embraced as a human, and in my like my spiritual understanding of myself, like I was able to like start exploring like what it might mean for me to be transgender. And like up until that point, I was super transphobic. Let me be clear, like super transphobic. Like that fear manifested in an outward, like I need to distance myself from trans people in every single way possible. But like coming closer to God, had my come to Jesus moment, and then, you know, it was come to everything else. But the way it kind of happened, and like there are all these little like serendipitous moments in my life that like I look back on and I think about, and I'm like, oh, that was a moment, like a capital M moment. Like I remember there was a day there was a park behind the apartment complex that I would like walk to after school every day to go practice. And I remember walking with my basketball, and I was like wearing my like workout clothes. Like I had my jersey and some basketball shorts on, and I was like running some like dribbling drills or something just on my way. And there were these two like older girls walking. They were far enough away so that you know, they didn't seem close to me, but close enough so that I could hear what they were saying. And as they were walking, I heard one of them say something like, "Oh, don't say that around that boy up there. Like, oh, don't say that boy's gonna hear you." And the other one goes, "I'm pretty sure that's a girl." And the first one was like, "No, that's a boy." And I was just absolutely delighted that they had no idea, that they could not tell, and that one of them was right.
So great.
Yeah, so like little moments like that where like it felt like I could take some joy and some pleasure in just being unreadable, or in like the fact that like my masculinity was so present that like people were like picking up on it and like feeling it and seeing it. That was also something that kind of was what made people reject me in a lot of ways. In college, when I started to like play around with gender, I hadn't really told anybody about anything yet. I went to this conference. I was a student activist, as pretty sure like most of us were. We all were. And I went to this conference. Was on the leadership of like the queer student organization at my university, and we went to this conference for LGBTQ orgs across the like on the western side of the country. It was at UC Santa Barbara that year. I'd never been to Santa Barbara. I was super stoked. And I get there on the first day of programming a little bit early because I want to hear the opening remarks. And I also want some time to plan my day. I'm an introvert, so having that time is like super important to me. I sat in a row that had nobody else sitting in it. It was early enough for people to like be able to pile in and like find where they wanted to be seated. Someone comes and sits down right next to me. And I'm just thinking, all of the empty seats, like there's so many empty seats in this auditorium, and you're going to come and sit right next to me. Okay, cool. It's like super indignant about it. Just like I guess my planning is done. Well, whatever.
The introvert horror.
yeah, the introvert horror. And then this person starts talking to me, and I'm like, oh no. And they're just making like pleasant conversation and learn a little bit about them. And at one point they go, "What's your name?" And so I told them my name, and they said, "Huh, that's your name. So what do people call you?" And like I hadn't told anybody anything, and was just starting to like try out names, and was just starting to like explore this. Like, I mean, like I had explored the names that I tried when I was 8 years old. That did not fit. Exploring a little bit more seriously, like I hadn't really told anybody about that yet. And this person just knew. And I just said, well, I guess you could call me Taj. And they just kind of looked at me and they're like, "I'll call you Taj then." Okay. I saw that person one other time and have never seen them since.
Yeah. Capital moment for sure.
Yeah.
Other moments. The other moments that I feel like the only other moment that happened, like there was a woman who came through my line at the grocery store I used to work at, and it was on the day that an innocent man was being executed in Texas, an innocent black man, and I was really broken up about it. And like she came through my line, and and I asked her how she was doing, and she was like, "Well, it's a terrible day. An innocent man is about to be executed." And I was just like, nobody has talked to me about this all day. She called the store later to ask me how I was doing after the fact. Like so beautifully. And then probably about 2 years after that, I was a street performer, and playing guitar and singing on the street, and she didn't remember who I was, stops in front of like as I'm doing my set, and like listens for a little bit, tosses me a little bit of money. And it was like on another day that like I think it was the day that George Zimmerman was sentenced. And she's just like, "Well, this is a terrible day because X, Y, and Z." And I'm like, "We've met before. You don't remember this." Like the only 2 times I've seen this person in my life was just like these little moments of like really deep grief and misery. And I'm like, wow, to share this with a complete stranger. Like little moments like that just happen for me. I don't know, capital M moments. But like this person reading me and asking me what I wanted to be called was one of them. And after that, I was like, okay, well, if this complete stranger can be fine with it, I guess maybe my friends can. And they were. And I told my friends, and turned out that there was like a little cohort of us who were all starting to transition around the same time. So it was 2009. YouTube was brand new. The trans men gathered on LiveJournal, and there were a handful of like Facebook communities, and I found nothing about being a Black trans man on the internet. There was one movie that was academic. It was like an academic acquisition only, and it cost something like $1,000 to rent, and it was like an event that you had to bring. Luckily, my student organization like got the funds and did that, but like that was the only instance of me like finding representation of like my story outside of having to seek out like other guys who were like on a similar path to me. Finding other Black trans men who were further down the road, absolutely unheard of at the time.
Yeah.
So yeah, feel like so much of my identity and my journey is like kind of bound up in this desire to be visible in ways that I feel like are not necessarily legible. Like you see me now, I have a beard. My voice is significantly lower than it was. Although if you listen to early recordings of me, like the timbre is exactly the same. But like, nowadays, like people see me and I tell I say that I'm trans, and they go, "Oh, so what are you thinking of changing your name to? Are you going to are you going to start taking estrogen?" And I'm like, "Oh, no, we've done that." But that's why I talk about it, because I feel like it's important to share. Yeah, it's all bound up in identity, spirituality, race, all of these, the confluence of things that make me who I am.
I totally agree. And it's like, it's so interesting because I can relate to a lot of different parts of your story and Stone's story. And then there's also parts that are like completely unique to you and your identity. But I think like to bring the cis folks into the conversation, like I think that's the crux, right? Of being trans is like there is this, you have to step out of the binary, and our society is built in binaries. And so there's this desire to be seen and to belong, and I think everyone has that desire, and it's just like way more visible while also being invisibilized for trans people, if that makes sense. So I know this is all we have time for right now. We're definitely going to be back on. There's so much we want to talk about. Like we didn't really get into the spirituality conversation, and I want to get into it. So before we wrap, do you guys have anything you wanted to share just to wrap up the conversation?
So, I'm a pastor, so if you give me the option to give a benediction, I'm going to do it. I want to take it. But yeah, I think just for me, it always just comes back down to like, to start asking the questions that, just start asking why things are the way that they are. And like, you find that it peels back the curtain on a lot of things that don't have to be. Nothing is set in stone except, cave etchings, and even those wear away with erosion. So,
and get layered. Yeah, I think. Yeah, I would say notice. What is it? Is it a Mary Oliver? Notice what your animal body loves. Like, I think the more we learn to trust ourselves on that really embodied, like physical level, that will give us clues about how to go forward. One of the things which is a whole nother topic. But one of the things that we notice is in times of crisis, people will help one another outside of any kind of societal difference, right? There's a hurricane and you watch white Southern good old boys pull Black people into the rowboat. You watch Black people rescue Klan members off their roofs, and they're be like, and they're just be like, hold it together, guys, we're coming, and that's because on an animal level, I really do believe that our basic instinct is to work together. And there is so much joy to be had in our bodies, in the physical world, in nature. And the kids have it right. Touch grass. Get out of your head. Like, ask yourself, does this feel good inside me? And if it does, why not go with that?
And that's a wrap on this week's episode of the Roots of Change podcast. The Roots of Change Agency was founded to support organizations, campaigns, and activists to avoid burnout and build strategies to cultivate connections that empower social change. Thank you so much for joining us this week. We are a 100% listener-supported podcast built on a community-led model. Your support allows us to create and release more resources for the whole community. You can find links to subscribe and donate to our work in the show notes. And please don't forget to follow the show on your favorite podcast app and share with a friend. Until next time, stay rooted.